Welcome. Should I feed on demand or to a schedule? You may have heard the idea of 3-hourly feeds being recommended. However, there are a few misconceptions around this common recommendation that I do want to clear up. Firstly, the 3-hour figure was never designed to be a goal, but rather a safety net. What does this mean? It means that if 3 hours have passed and our babies have not asked for a feed, we will insist they have one. This safety net has been designed to make sure that babies who are struggling to adapt to the outside world are not left to sleep through their own feeding cues. Crucially, the 3 hours is measured from the start of feed to the start of the next feed. Some babies are more at risk for forgetting to cue for food, and so we routinely keep all babies on this 3-hour safety net until they've met 3 milestones. They need to be more than 40 weeks gestation, so if they were born before their due date, we need to wait for that due date to pass. They need to be back to their birth weight. Most babies will lose weight in the first few days of life, and most will be back to birth weight by around 2 weeks of age. And they should weigh more than 3 kilos. Low birth weight babies can struggle with the stamina to wake up for feeds without help. Once they've achieved all 3 of these milestones, we can relax on the insistence that they eat at least every 3 hours. Does this mean that you can now move to a schedule? Once they've hit this milestone and you're no longer clock watching, you can move into a more baby-led phase of feeding. In this stage, we acknowledge that it is our role as parents to provide suitable feeds, whether that's breastfeeding or formula, whenever our babies are cueing. It is their responsibility to decide whether to feed and how much to take. Like adults, there are many reasons that a baby would cue for a feed, especially for breastfed babies. And what may feel frustrating initially is that sometimes a 20-minute feed is followed up by a brilliant 3 hours sleep, and sometimes a 90-minute feed is only followed by a 20-minute sleep before they cue for more food. Both of these situations are normal. Admittedly, one of them is more comfortable for the parents. Our babies are the best judge of their own needs, and so we continue to feed on demand for at least the first few months. The trouble with a schedule is twofold. Firstly, a breastfed baby who is fed on a strict schedule is at high risk for not getting enough milk over the course of the day, and restricting access to the breast could actually lead to lowering supply over time. Secondly, babies are born with an inbuilt appetite mechanism that allows them to regulate their own intake. If we are feeding in a baby-led manner, easily done with breastfeeding but needs to be much more carefully managed with bottle feeding, see episode 26 for this, they will build a lifelong habit of eating when hungry and naturally stopping when full. However, if we regularly override this mechanism through adult-led bottle feeding, which encourages larger feeds less frequently, then this can lead to challenges in later life in managing appetite and regulating food intake. So when may a schedule be relevant? It is rarely relevant to introduce a strict schedule of feeds for a breastfed baby, simply because they are meeting so many of their needs outside of hunger and thirst through breastfeeding. We cannot always know what needs are being fulfilled by this feed, and so usually the simplest and kindest option is to continue to feed on demand. Bottle-fed infants are slightly different. Since the sole purpose of a bottle feed is hunger or thirst, we can be more comfortable with instigating a schedule once baby is a few months old. The best way is to watch for any predictable patterns starting to form in their feeding behaviours, and then build the schedule around these behaviours. Milk needs in volume remain static from around 6 to 8 weeks of age. At this point, babies need in the region of 750 ml to a litre of milk a day. Although some schedules recommend very large feeds only 4 or 5 times a day, it is healthier for your baby to watch their natural appetite cues and to build your schedule around volumes they feel comfortable to take in a session. For reference, the biological norm of breastfeeding, typical breastfed babies max out somewhere around 120 to 150 ml per feed. So, to recap, when it comes to feeding babies, it is important to establish a safety net of feeding at least every 3 hours until the baby has met certain milestones, such as being back to birth weight, being more than 40 weeks gestation, and weighing more than 3 kilos. After these milestones have been met, parents can transition to a more baby-led phase of feeding, where the baby cues to feed whenever they need to. While a schedule is rarely necessary for breastfed bottles, bottle-fed infants can have a schedule once they're a few months old, and parents have observed predictable patterns in their feeding behaviours. It is important to build that schedule around the baby's natural appetite cues rather than forcing larger feeds less frequently, as this can lead to challenges in regulating food intake in later life.